Welcome everybody. As you can see, the chat function is now working. So please go ahead and share your name and your organization, maybe where you are right now, so we can see who's here. I'm Laura Lee. I'm the Director of Grant Making at the Maine Community Foundation, and I am joined by my colleagues, Laura Reed, who is a Senior Foundation Officer, and Joey Landaro, who's our Program Associate. So if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to use the raise hand function. I'm gonna do a presentation. I'll go through some slides here, and it should only take, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes. So there'll be plenty of time for questions. We'll go through one at a time through the raised hands, and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question yourself. Laura will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A just to see if there's anything, just really easy, fast questions. She can try to answer those there as we go along.
Laura, I just want to chime in here.
Yeah.
I have seen in the Q&A some folks asking about their video. Yes, your video is disabled. This is a listening session.
Yep, this is a webinar format, so it means that you can only see the presenters and you can't really see each other. So that's why please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. And but at the end, we can allow folks to. Why am I seeing somebody pop up? You can allow folks to. We can allow folks to unmute, so that way we can let you ask your own questions. So, okay, so with that, I will go ahead and get us started. Let's see. All right, so just for a quick overview of the Maine Community Foundation, we are a statewide nonprofit, and we bring people and resources together to build a better Maine. So for those of you who may notice, that is a new mission statement. We partner with people, including nonprofit leaders, community members, philanthropic individuals, and government officials. We use resources such as charitable dollars, research, community knowledge, and relationships to build on Maine's strengths and address its greatest challenges. So one of the ways that we fulfill our mission is through over 20 grant programs. And our largest grant program is the Community Building Grant Program. It's a grassroots grant program that makes grants across the state. And the funding comes from dedicated permanent county funds, but also from other related funds. So you're not applying to a specific fund, but to the overall grant program. And many funds sort of support this grant program. Proposals that you submit are reviewed by committees of local community members who either live or work in that county or region. We have 15 review committees. 12 of them are single county committees. And then we have 2 regional committees. The Western Mountains Committee makes up Franklin and Somerset, and Southern Mid-Coast represents Lincoln and Saginaw. And then we also have one statewide committee that gets seated every year specifically for doing that grant making. One of the most frequently asked questions we get is who is eligible to apply. And there is more specific information on our website, but basically nonprofit, 501c3 organizations, also municipalities, public schools, public agencies working for the state of Maine, Indian tribal governments, and or political subdivisions, and also any group that doesn't have any tax status, so gets organized around a specific project and has a fiscal sponsor that is an eligible organization. So then that would be a fiscal sponsorship, and there is more information about fiscal sponsorships on our website for those of you who might be needing that. And then one other frequently asked question I'll just cover from the very beginning is, will my proposals be shared with donors who have donor advised funds at the Maine Community Foundation? So I'm sure many of you know we do have many donors, and you may already know some of them. But the primary way that we share proposals is through our competitive grant programs. So for proposals that meet the grant program criteria, we add them to an online donor portal that we have. And so that is one way that we share them with donors who are interested in finding out, what our current needs, and can have ways to filter through those. We also have staff who work with donors who, will also use that portal to kind of filter and find proposals that their donors might be interested in and forward those to them. Donors may choose to partially or fully support a proposal. And let's see. Yes, so but just to make, I just want to note that we only put eligible proposals up there. So the proposal that's submitted does need to be eligible for the program that you're submitting for. Okay, so let's move on here. And this is just some statistics from the grant cycle this past year. This is our largest grant program, and so we receive the most applications, and often over 400 from across the state. And we have a really nice report on this year's community building grant program that's available on our website. So if you hover over the word grants in the green banner on our home screen, you'll get a drop-down menu, and at the very bottom of that it says reports and resources. So if you go there, the community building report is at the top of the page on the left side. So one thing I just wanted to point out, you can see that there were 288 grants that were made last year, and that's 192 from the committees. And so those are the committees that I just mentioned, the county and a couple of regional committees and statewide committees. But then there were also 96 from donors. So what that means is that when we do share proposals, some of our donors have supported them. And just so you know, because this can be confusing, when a donor does choose to make a grant, we go ahead and send out that grant as soon as they make that grant. So it's possible that you could get a grant if it's funded by a donor, much sooner than maybe somebody else who gets a grant from the committee. So let's see, just a couple more details. The deadline is February 15th at 11:59. So because we have an online system, it's more that it just kind of shuts, it just shuts itself down at that time. So I would advise not to cut it too close, just because, clocks can be different and all of that. So I would leave yourself a good buffer on that, and that is a Wednesday in 2023, just so you know. And another frequently asked question is whether or not you can apply in consecutive years. And so for community building and for most of our grant programs, the answer is yes. The general rule is 1 application per grant program per year. Okay, so let's see. So following the last year, so the 2021 grant cycle, I spoke with several grantees to find out how, the application process was working for them, and to discuss some of the challenges that their organizations were facing. And we received a lot of valuable feedback in the grant reports. And so what we heard was that, a lot of the organizations were really still responding to the impacts of the pandemic and really needed flexible funding to sustain their organizations and meet challenges, as well as respond to opportunities. So this year in 2022, these were some of the ways that we responded. We returned to our 3 core criteria. We introduced general support grants, so that's flexible, unrestricted funding. We simplified the application. And we developed some additional resources, which included a Word document with the application questions, as well as some guidance within that, and translated that document with the guidance. And last year we had 3 languages, and this year we're adding a language. So there will be Spanish, French, Arabic, and Portuguese that will be available on our website before the end of this month. And so for next year, we're continuing with these efforts to sort of clarify and simplify. We did some streamlining of the organizational financial information section. So I hope that that will be an easier section to complete. And we have not made any changes to the core criteria or types of support provided. So here, I'll start going through those. So these are the same 3 core criteria that we have been using in recent years. The first one, invest in people by increasing skills, knowledge, abilities, and/or well-being. So the review committee is trying to understand how people will benefit from your proposed activities. The second one, engage the people you serve in the design, delivery, and/or evaluation of the work. So here they're really looking for that community engagement or engagement of the specific people who are benefiting, participating, being served by whatever the work that you're doing is. And the committee is, looking at the breadth and depth of that engagement. And then the last one, strengthen community resources. This can include organizations, partnerships, built and natural environments. So really kind of identifying, in addition to the people that are being served, and some kind of community resource that is being strengthened or improved or made more accessible by the work that you're doing. And then, so the types of funding. So as I mentioned, there are general support grants for ongoing program and operational needs. So for this, your organization's primary work or your mission would need to align with those community building criteria that I just went over. And we have a few more requirements. Your organization must be located in Maine. And also have had expenses below $500,000 in your most recently completed fiscal year. So we're really looking for the smaller end of organizations. And then also you cannot be a municipality, government agency, public school, or faith-based organization. So these organizations may be eligible to apply for project grants. So I'm only talking about general support grants. In terms of that restriction. And just a note, the one change we did make for next year is to allow applicants that are using a fiscal sponsor to apply for that general support grant type. And then for project grants, these are for new or expanding projects that meet those community building criteria, those 3 I just went over. So new projects are considered new within the first 2 years of implementation. And we no longer define expanding in terms of only new geographic region or population or content. It can mean simply serving more people. So in terms of how we allocate the funding, we were concerned this past year when we introduced general support funding that our review committees might favor project grants because they have clearly stated, defined budgets and activities. So the way that we ensured, that general support and project support were really treated equally was by establishing target funding goals for each of our committees based on the amounts that were requested of each type of funding. So this approach resulted in our committees really funding at similar levels to the sort of amounts that were requested, in terms of what ended up being funding. So our plan is to take the same approach next year. And let's see, This is just to make sure you understand that for those types of organizations that we were saying should not be applying for general support, that they would still be eligible for project support, assuming that project, meets those the criteria. So in terms of, let's see, why municipalities, government agencies, and public schools are not eligible for general support, that is because we don't want to be replacing public funding sources for general operating support for those sort of government agencies. And in terms of faith-based organizations, our general eligibility guidelines don't allow us to fund religious activities. And so a faith-based organization could apply for a specific project that does not include religious activities. So that's how we wouldn't be able to restrict that if it was a general support grant. And let's see, so in terms of, you will be asked on the application about the county, the primary county that is served. So you will need to identify one county that will be most directly benefiting from the funding request. And any of the funds that are awarded need to be spent within that county because of the requirements of our funds. So if your organization serves 2 counties and you are applying for general support, you need to select the county in which your organization or the main office of your organization is located. You should select statewide if 3 or more counties will directly benefit from the funding that is requested. So the county that you select will then determine the committee that will review your application and also how it will be sorted in our Giving Together donor portal. Let's see. Okay, so these are some ineligible expenses, but these only apply to project grants. So as I mentioned before, general support grants are unrestricted. So for project grants, general operating expenses are not eligible as full requests. 20% of the project budget may be dedicated to administrative costs. That can be, anything for your operating expenses, like rent or utilities or bookkeeping. You can simply have a line that just says administrative costs, and you don't need to, specify how you're going to use those funds. It just shouldn't go over 20%, or for example, the max award is $10,000, so it shouldn't be going over $2,000, for example, for a $10,000 request. So let's see, our eligibility and grant guidelines apply to both project and general support grants in terms of our general ones. So this is also on our website under our eligibility and grant guidelines. So there are some things that we can't fund, and that's expenses that have already been incurred. So if the project started earlier and there are certain things that, you had already paid for, so those can't be things that are included in the grant application. It needs to be things that will be happening and you'll be paying for after June 1st. So that's important to know. Also re-granting to a secondary grantee through a competitive process. That's also not allowed. Political campaigns, lobbying, like, calls to action on a specific vote. And as I mentioned, religious activities. Okay, so here is the sort of timetable of the overall grant program. As I mentioned, February 15th is the deadline. And then our grants administrative staff does due diligence. And so that is, assuring that you are in good standing with the IRS and have that eligibility, the correct eligibility there. And then our program staff are going to be making sure that applications meet the program criteria. And then depending on the number of proposals received, a subcommittee may also be used to assess the alignment with the criteria and limit the final pool of proposals to make it really a manageable amount for the committee to review. So all of the proposals that then end up in that final review pool would be assigned to a county advisor or a staff member who would serve as that lead reviewer and would follow up with a phone call in late March or April. So if for some reason your application does not end up in that final pool, then there would not be a phone call. So just FYI. Okay, so, and also just in terms of the timing, as I mentioned, when a donor makes a grant, we're going to immediately send out that letter and check, and that's going to come by regular mail. And so that means you might receive a check before the review committee meets. And if your request was partially funded, then the review committee would still consider potentially supporting the remaining amount in your request. If your request was fully funded by a donor, then it's most likely that that committee would decline to give more, additional support so that they can, just be able to fund other proposals. A donor could also choose to support a proposal after the committee has met. So we have this donor portal, as I mentioned, and we're leaving those proposals in there for a longer period of time, really almost a year till the next cycle. And so, so it's possible that a donor might decide to make a grant, long after the cycle has been over. And in some cases, might end up funding even more than the requested amount. So that's why it's helpful to see the full, if it's a project, full sort of budget. And this year we started doing notifications by email through our grant review system. So all of the notifications. So if there is a decline, that would just be that email letting you know that. And if an award was made, we would it's really kind of a heads up to know that something is going to be coming in the regular mail so that you can keep an eye out for it. So it'd be really helpful if you have a way to have a list of accepted addresses. So these emails come from grant proposals at maincf.org. So if there's a way for you to, so that it doesn't go into your spam and junk folders, or you should also check your spam and junk folders. That's another way just to make sure you don't miss that email. So yes, the notifications will be going out in sort of mid to late May. And so now I just want to give you a quick little, tour to show you just how to get in to the our online system. So here's a shot of our homepage, and in that top right-hand corner, you'll see two buttons, and you'd want to click on that green login button. And then that will take you to this landing page. And here you'd want to click on the login here button for the online grant system. And that's in that top right hand section. And that will take you to this page. So you have a couple choices there. If you have previously used our online grant application system and have an email and password, you would choose login. And use that information. If you have forgotten your password, you can click on the link that says forgot your password and you can reset it yourself. If this is your first time submitting an online grant application for us, then you want to click on the register button, and you will need to create an account. And you would create an account using your name and an email address, or by using one of your social media accounts. And so just the important thing to know is once you set up an account with an email address, you need to use that same email address in order to log back in. And then there's those click here's, there's a step-by-step instructions, really like screenshotted, very detailed instructions for how to start a new grant application, and just can give you a little bit of orientation to our system. And just so you know, you can save your application as you're working on it and come back to it and finish it later. You don't have to do it in one shot or one sitting. And you can also add collaborators. So if there are others that you are working on the application with, they can read it, they can edit it. So it's a nice way to be able to work on it together, so you don't have to, you know, work on it sort of offline and then get it in. And I would actually really highly urge you to do that, because there are some word counts limits. So, you know, it would be very painful to create something not in the system and then get it into the system and realize that it needs to be edited down. So for all those reasons, I would encourage you to just go ahead and get into our system. And, you know, if you have others you're working with, work with them on it in the system. And then this is a screenshot of what our community building web page looks like on our website. And to get here, you can scroll down on our homepage, and there's a spotlight program at the bottom, which currently has community building. And if you click there, it'll take you right to this page. And this includes all of the community building grant program information, and also links to some important resources. This is where you probably came to register for this webinar. And it's where we would put the link to the recording of this webinar. We also right now have there that document, the Word document I mentioned, that is the 2023 application questions, and also has some additional guidance in there. And also where, you know, once we have those translated versions, they will appear here as well. And then in that quick overview section you see on the left side, and then circle down there towards the bottom, are the staff contact. So, and it says varies by county, but that's a link. So it'll take you to the county and regional program page. And if you scroll down at the very bottom, there's a list of staff members and their contacts by county. But here I will give you our staff contacts. So we will be, we're in the middle of finishing up a hiring process. So we anticipate a new program officer that will be covering the Southern Mid-Coast Regional Committee. And there may be some other little changes. So I can't promise you this will stay exactly the same. There'll be maybe a couple of minor changes, but for now, these are the sort of contacts for any questions that you might have. So let's see, when are good times to contact a staff member? So certainly before submitting an application, if you are, you know, just thinking about what might be a strong proposal, you know, if you're having any thoughts about that, please feel free to reach out to the appropriate staff member. That's a good time to just kind of talk through some ideas. It's not a requirement, but that can be a great time to, you know, deal with any questions ahead of time. Also, if it happens that, you know, these programs are very competitive, there's always more great proposals than we're able to fund. So if you do receive a decline email, that's another time. That's a great time to reach out to a staff member to, you know, learn more about how you might be able to strengthen your application for the next year or for the future submissions. And sometimes there might be some feedback, helpful feedback that the staff member can give you, or it may, you know, simply be that it was just really competitive. So that, oh, and then another time that, you know, you might be contacting is if you have a grant award, and if there are any kind of significant changes or anything that comes up, that's another good time to contact your staff contact. Okay, so I can actually, the next slide is just like question and answers and thanking you for joining us. So I'll leave up this staff context for just a couple more, maybe just one more minute, if anybody wants to write that down. And then if you have any questions, you can use the raise hand, but I'm gonna ask Laura if there's any questions from the chat or Q&A that would be helpful to share so that other people hear and hear questions.
So we had over 20 questions come in.
Oh, so, okay.
If you folks saw me focused and looked like I was typing, I absolutely was.
Great.
So, and I think there are a couple too in the chat, which I haven't even gotten to yet because I was focused on the Q&A.
Okay, so, well, let's go through it.
So let's see, let's go to the answered questions. For actually what we'll do is I'll take the 3 that just came in through the chat, through the question and answer, and we'll try to answer those. And then I'll go back through the other 20 that came while we were in the middle of the presentation.
Okay.
So the first question, Laura, here is, are there any areas that Maine CF is focusing on this time around? For example, service areas, social needs they are looking to focus on, such as housing or basic needs. I'll let you answer that, Laura.
So the community building grant program, is really a broadly focused program on strengthening communities. And so because we're, looking across the state, it can really, those issues can really vary. So that's sort of on purpose. We haven't been focusing the entire program on, a smaller set of issues because we want, our local volunteer reviewers to really be thinking about what's happening in their particular region or part of the state and what is going to make the most impact in that particular place. So, and we do try to actually, have a broad kind of response, or, so that all the sort of awards aren't kind of skewed in kind of one direction. So to really think in a broad way about what's going to strengthen the communities in that county or region.
Okay. So another one that we have here is, would a new organization, it's their first year operating in 2023, as a 501c3, be a good candidate for a general support grant? Or would that be viewed poorly? That's the question.
That's a good question. I mean, I would say it probably would be helpful, or like, I think it would be a little stronger to potentially do a project grant in that situation, because there is more sort of specific detailed information you can provide about, because probably your project in a way is your whole organization, but then you can provide that much more sort of detailed level about what you're doing. So I would say you probably, if eligible, could do either one. But I think because of the sort of higher level of detail you're able to provide in the project, it's more likely that that will be stronger. But Laura, what would you say?
I would agree. I think that makes sense. I think that the project one might be the stronger way to go, because it does allow you to provide that level of detail that you can't, or that it's just that the application's not set up to receive for general. It helps the organization, maybe helps the review committee learn a little bit more about your organization and what you plan to do with those funds. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and we have more questions coming in fast and furiously. Let me go, let's see. Here's another one.
Well, you know what, if there were a lot of questions that have been answered, I would encourage people to go read the Q&A in case there are things that to make sure that, you saw the questions and answers. So I want to make sure we get to people who haven't had their questions answered. So why don't we go to to questions that
So-
haven't been answered first.
Okay, great. So, and there are only, I think, one or two back in the Q&A that I didn't answer that I thought we would hold for the end. So I'll go back and find those two. So last year there was a $10,000 cap on general support grants. Is that the same standard for 2023? Yes, that's correct. The maximum award through community building is $10,000
For all grants.
for all grants, project or general.
Right.
And this next one is, are the agency's past years audited financials required? Also, if we are submitting an application for project level support, do we need to provide an agency-wide budget in addition to a project budget? Laura, I'm going to let you answer this because it might be a good time to explain how we've changed the financial section.
So if you're applying for a project, there is a project budget section for the project. And then there is for both projects and general support grants, a sort of organizational financial section. And if you go into that guidance document, you'll see exactly how it's set up, but it's really just, you don't have to submit your budget, your organizational budget or an I-90 or anything like that. It's really just a sort of overall snapshot in terms of last year's, I think it's, you know, revenues, expenses, and net income for last year. And then so that would be actual, and then the current year budgeted numbers. So, so all of that you'll see either in the application or in that guidance document will have exactly what it will look like. And yes, that is for the organization for either type of support.
Okay. One of the last questions, this had come in a lot during the session. Multiple people have asked this, so I'm going to answer this one right now. Folks are asking if an organization has multiple projects or programs. Some of the other questions also said, in different geographic regions, can I submit multiple applications? No, you cannot. You can submit one proposal per cycle or per organization. Here's another question.
You have to sort of decide what is your priority in terms of the location, so that when you choose that one county, it's just that one proposal that will go.
This question says, in the community building section of the application for general support grants, there is not a word count on many of the answers. Do you have a suggested word count?
Joey, is that right? There's no word count. Do you mean a word count limit?
I'm assuming that's what's being asked, is a word count limit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if there isn't one, I thought that there was, so I'm not sure. If there isn't one, then no, I don't necessarily have a suggested amount. I mean, it's what, you know, you need in order to convey, you know, what to answer the question.
The question might be that we have a guidance document, and if all you've done is looked at the guidance document and you haven't actually logged into our online grant system to actually fill out the application, I think you'll find when you get into the application online, you'll see that there are word counts for things.
Yeah, in that guidance document might have said, you know, somewhere at the top, like most of these questions have a word limit of, you know, I can't remember what most of them are. So yes, I think it'd be helpful to, that's why it would be helpful to get into the application and see those word counts per, most of them have the same one though for each answer.
Okay. So the next question here is, last year, what percentage of applications were awarded, number of awards based on the total applications received? What I would say to this is it varies greatly by county, because as Laura mentioned in her presentation, the amount available to award is different by county. So, and the number of applications we receive is different by county. So across the entire community building grant program, we receive over 400 applications, as she noted. And I believe that the percentage, maybe you've committed this to memory, Laura or Joey, but I believe it's around 50%. That's also available on the community building webpage. It says at the top what the percentage is.
Yeah, and actually, I just had that up on my, so I just went back to that slide. It was, so this year, it was 62% of applicants received a grant. And that is either, you know, a committee, or that's counting those DAF grants. So, but like Laura said, it really can vary by county. Because of the difference in the grant budget available per county. So a lot of these funds are geographically restricted for us. So they're not, so we can't even like make it equal across counties.
Okay. Are you allocating your awards 50-50 between project and general operating?
No, so I was worried I didn't maybe explain that very well. So it's proportional. So we will come up with sort of target grant budgets for those two different funding types based on what we received. So that, you know, if we received like 50% general and 50% project in one particular committee, then we would divide that grant budget and sort of as a target, you know, it's not like a hard and fast kind of thing, but as a target, we want them to consider making it kind of the grants as kind of equal as possible. So it's more proportional to what is received.
All right, so this question is,
Are these all written questions? Okay,
Yes.
so there are still people with hands raised. Okay.
Okay, so I'll keep trying to answer some of these ones that are written if Joey and you want to move on to some of the hands raised.
Well, are there a lot more? Let's keep going. I wasn't sure if there are people like with hands raised waiting. So
there are over 30 questions that are.
Oh,
in
okay.
this
All right.
section. So I think it would
Let's
be good
keep
to
going.
switch over to the other for the. You want me to keep going on the written questions?
Are these ones that have been answered?
Not all of them. There's
Okay.
still probably 7 now that are not answered.
Okay, well,
So
let's definitely
I would
focus on the ones, I want to get to ones that are not answered.
Right, that's what we've been doing. So,
Okay, okay.
but I would say, how about I keep answering these in typed responses and you and Joey move on to the hands that are raised.
Okay,
Yeah, because
all
they're
right.
because
we don't know
there's
what.
2 hands up right now. at the
Okay,
moment.
let's do that.
All right, so I'm going to start by unmuting Keelan. So Keelan, give me just a moment here.
There's no need. My question was early on, just raised my hand because the chat wasn't working.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Then well,
Thanks,
thank you for letting us know. All right, and next it looks like we have a question from Norma Milton.
Hi,
And
Norma.
Am I being heard now?
Yes.
Okay. Not familiar with computers, but what my concern is, we have a project. Created a free spay neuter clinic here in Aroostook County, needed, but we're expecting it's going to take us 1 to 5 years. Basically, we want to be fully operated in all aspects within 3 years, giving ourselves some leeway to try to clean up end results the last 2 years of that 5-year time. So with Project Grant, do I understand that we could put in for a 3-year, we would be putting in for $30,000 for a 3-year grant, $10,000 a year? Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
Right. So the community building grants are only for 1 year. They're 1-year grants, and $10,000 is the maximum award for a 1-year period.
Okay, so we should plan that anything that we are trying to do, hopefully for this grant, the work can actually be completed until after June 1.
Right, so it can only fund work that starts after June 1 and then and is done and is completed or done within that next year.
Okay, so we might have to plan on new plumbing throughout the building, at one stage for hopefully another grant that would come in through this winter, and maybe for electrical type things after June 1. We have to postpone work projects in order to have the money to pay for them, is what I'm thinking. There's no way we can one
So
section of
Norma,
the building.
your connection is not great, but
Oh.
from what I think I could make out that maybe are you doing some renovation or construction on the building?
Yes.
Because for this, unless you're applying for general support, so maybe you're applying for general support and then that funding would be unrestricted, but for project, sort of building construction would probably not be eligible, right, Laura?
Sorry, I was answering this question.
Oh,
So I didn't hear it, but you're asking about building.
Building construction for a project.
Yeah, no, I don't really
Yeah.
feel like that would be eligible or well aligned with this program. I think
Yeah.
that asking for, if there was something specific related to a program you plan to operate in that building,
Mhm.
that might be something that is eligible, but generally building construction or renovation costs aren't aligned with this program because it is only a $10,000 award.
Yeah, and
Okay.
also, Norma, I hope you know about our animal welfare grant program. So maybe that's something I can connect you to. John Ochira would be the contact for that.
Okay. My concern is that we have a mortgage-free building, but we need to go in there and renovate it to set it up for the clinic itself.
Yeah,
So this would I be better off to go for general support?
yes,
And we
if it's
work as
for
we go
building
along?
renovation, then yes, I would go for general support, assuming that, right, your organization would meet all those criteria.
Okay, thank you so much. That answered a
Yeah.
lot for me.
Okay, great.
All right, so I see we have several other questions and we only have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to continue to try to answer as many as we can. There's
Okay.
one here that says, are grants all or nothing? So can you receive it less than 10,000? Yes, 10,000 is the maximum that you can receive. We get many requests that are under that amount. Also, if your question may be asking, will you sometimes receive less than full funding? It can happen, but we do try to encourage our committees to fully fund when they can. So that's the answer to that one. Here's one about our food pantry is sponsored by my church, but there's no religious activity taking place. Would our pantry be eligible for a grant to provide fresh fruit and veggies and sit down lunches for our customers? Laura, why don't you take that one?
Well, is the church a fiscal sponsor or is it the organization? I mean, so I guess that would be important to know. If the church is running the food pantry, then it can be certainly the food pantry could be that project that is being applied for, assuming that the food pantry is open to everyone in the community.
All right. So here's another question that we had, Laura, that has come up before and after the presentation. It says, what is the rationale intention behind only offering general support grants, flexible funding to orgs with expenses under 500,000?
I think because this has always been a sort of grassroots grant program, so really generally focused on kind of really hyper local projects, activities that are being done, and those tend to be by smaller organizations. Also, I think the idea was that with a $10,000 maximum award, it would have a greater impact on those smaller organizations. And when we did an analysis of our applicants, I would say actually the majority of them were under that sort of budget amount. So it's kind of the way that we're really trying to focus on where we think we'd have the greater impact. Laura, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't have anything to add
Okay.
to that.
Okay.